It's August and it is hot. Gardens are struggling from heat and neglect. But as the next gardening season approaches, we have to help the garden get through this month and ready for fall. In today's video, I'll cut back the cover crops and show you how I prepare beds for planting and guide you through caring for your vegetables, flowers, fruit trees, and landscape plants. We'll talk about how often to water and which pests to expect this month. I'm Angela from Growing in the Garden. My garden is in Mesa, Arizona. I want to help you succeed even if you're gardening in tough conditions. If you're wondering what to plant this month, check out my calendars and guide or my What to Plant in August video. I'll link to them here. When you're thinking about your vegetable garden this month, make a plan for what you're going to plant. We don't have enough room to grow everything that we want to eat. Think about the crops you're most excited to grow and that you can't wait to harvest from the garden. Make a plan that includes all of those vegetables, fruits, flowers, and herbs. If you're struggling a little bit, I have planting plans on my website for each season for small, medium, and large gardens. I'll link to them right here. Let's get my garden beds ready to plant. Over time, the soil level in your beds will go down as that organic matter is used up. The soil level in this bed has gone down quite a bit, and I spent some time digging out some roots from this tree out of this bed. So we need to add some organic matter back into this bed. I've got cover crops growing in other areas. I'm gonna chop those off and add them to this bed. I'm gonna put a nice layer of worm castings. Aim to add about a pound for every 40 square feet. An easy way to do that is just put a light layer of worm castings over the whole bed. And next, I'm gonna top it with compost. Aim for at least 1 inch of compost. More is not bad. And finally, if there's still room in the bed, I'll top it with some raised bed mix because the level in this bed has gone down so much. In this bed, the soil level hasn't gone down quite as much, so I'm just adding a layer of worm castings and 1 inch of compost. Generally, this is all I do to get my beds ready. But if your garden has struggled or hasn't grown well, consider testing your soil. Then you can amend the soil with fertilizer as directed by the soil test. If you're not going to plant until September or October, let your cover crop keep going. Or plant a quick growing cover crop like buckwheat in that bed. Cut back your cover crops 2 to 3 weeks before it's time to plant. That gives those crops time to break down in the bed. Even though it's hot, make an effort to spend time in your garden every day. That way you can catch problems when they're small and keep up with harvesting. Overripe crops and lots of garbage and debris in your garden are a breeding ground for pests and diseases. Keeping it cleaned up and harvested will help your garden be healthier. If I was using these beans as a cover crop, I'd make sure to get all of the beans picked so I wasn't planting seeds along with the cover crop. If something dies or has a lot of pests, it's best to cut your losses and get it out of your garden. Your pepper, eggplants, and tomatoes are probably struggling. But if you look close on the stem, you might see some new growth. If you want to reinvigorate those plants, cut them back to that point, amend with compost and worm castings, and then you're going to see a flush of new growth and you'll get an excellent harvest this fall. You don't have to cut them back. If your plants are growing well and you're happy with the size, that's fine. But over time, these plants can get large and overgrown, and pepper branches especially are very brittle. It's nice to keep them a manageable size, and you're still gonna get a really good harvest. Don't worry, your plants will grow back. I cut these back a couple of weeks ago and I was pretty nervous because it was so hot. Look at all of this new growth. I can see these leaves are a little bit yellow, and so I'm gonna come back in with some compost and worm castings, give it some food, or you can do a light dose of a fish emulsion just to green this up a little bit. If you're growing tomatoes, you have a couple of decisions to make. Take a look at your plant and see how it's doing. If it's really struggling and has a lot of dieback and not looking good, easy choice. Take that plant out and plant new ones. It's an excellent time to plant. If though, the plant looks pretty good and you want to keep it going, look for that new growth and you can do the same thing. Prune that back a little bit, Add some castings and compost, and you'll see a flush of new growth. And the best part is that older plant is going to have nice deep roots, and it will just take off once you do that. This is new growth coming on this tomato plant. I could cut it back to here and just let it go, which I might do to see how it does. But this plant is also really struggling. So this one is a tough call. It's not always an easy decision on what to do. If you're growing cantaloupe, watermelon, Armenian cucumbers, they've probably been producing fruit. They may just keep going for the next several weeks. If you see that production start to go down, that plant might be finishing up. Keep an eye on your plants and pull out those plants that are done. But as we see temperatures come down, plants that weren't producing may also begin to put out fruit. It's a time of transition, but hopefully you'll see more fruit production this month. I've harvested a lot of fruit off of this cantaloupe, but I can see that it still has fruit forming, so I'm leaving it in. Some of my beans have been producing, but others have just been forming blossoms and then they fall off. This month, you should see these blossoms develop into beans finally, and you'll have lots of harvests. So I've been harvesting okra in other beds, but I planted a bunch in this bed and it's gonna keep growing, and I'll have lots of okra this fall. If you've got sweet potatoes growing, let them grow. Hopefully they're growing and taking over. This is a big month for sweet potatoes. They're gonna start bulking up and you'll be harvesting later this fall. Hopefully your roselle plants are getting large. A large plant means more fruit. You probably won't see blossoms for a few weeks, but let them keep going and we'll look forward to all that fruit. If your indoor grown seedlings are outgrowing their pots, but you're not ready to plant them outside, it's important to pot them up into a larger container. You want those roots to have plenty of room to grow so they can keep on growing once they get outside. If you've got seedlings growing inside and they have several sets of true leaves, it's time to start fertilizing. Use a half dose of a seaweed and fish emulsion and feed them every other time that you water. Let's talk about the pests that we'll see this month. One pest that begins to show up is grasshoppers. Hand pick them if you can and hope that the birds help you out. Spider mites like hot, dry conditions. Keeping things sprayed down will help. Squash bugs, three-line potato bugs, tomato hornworms, leaf-footed bugs. The best defense for all of those yucky pests is hand picking and daily vigilance with that bucket of soapy water. Whiteflies look like a cloud coming off the leaf when it's disturbed. They can get out of control if left unchecked. If you have an area with a lot of whiteflies, you might want to treat with soapy water. I use a teaspoon of Dawn in a spray bottle and spray every day, and then rinse that area off so that the soap doesn't burn the leaves. Do that daily, and hopefully that infestation won't get out of control. The soap's gonna kill them on contact, so it's okay to spray them off. Do it first thing in the morning or later in the evening so the sun doesn't damage the leaves. You might see bird damage on your melon and sunflower leaves. Although it damages the leaves, the plant usually survives. Consider putting out a bird bath for thirsty birds. If you keep planting seeds and nothing comes up, you might have roly-polies eating the seedlings. They especially love beans and melons. The best thing I've found is to sprinkle a small amount of this snail bait at the time of planting. It's iron phosphate. They eat it, it slows them down, and they eventually die. It's non-toxic to worms, and it may even help your flowers bloom. You might see milkweed bugs or other seed bugs on seed pods. They're harmless and best left alone. That buzz every night during August is the cicadas. If you look around, you'll probably see their empty exoskeletons in different places of your yard. You don't need to treat them. They're seasonal and don't cause much damage. If you're planting in containers this month, fill them back up with raised bed mix. Keep your small containers put away. It's not time to bring them out yet. Keep your summer blooming flowers like zinnias and gomphrena, tithonia, deadheaded. That will encourage more blooms. Growing lots of zinnias for cut flowers this year, and these are still looking good, but not quite ready to harvest yet. If you're going to plant a wildflower garden this October, now's the time to order the seeds. If you've got flowers growing in containers, it's a good idea to give them a light dose of fertilizer this month. That will encourage more blooms. Save seeds from your favorite flowers this month. Let them dry completely on the plant. When they're brown and dry, you'll know they're ready and the seeds have formed on the inside. If you haven't already, it's time to order ranunculus and anemone corms. When they come, store them inside in a cool spot. You'll plant them out in October and you'll thank me next spring. When sunflowers finish up, don't pull them out. You're gonna pull out so much soil and dirt and everything. Instead, cut them off at the base and those roots will reabsorb back into the soil. Chop up those sunflowers and add them to your compost bin. They will heat it right up. Evaluate your roses. They might look a little haggard this month, but if plants are severely stressed and sunburned, think about moving them to a shadier location this fall. Plants won't look their best because when it's so hot, it's hard for them to take up all of the nutrients in the soil. So keep your roses lightly deadheaded. You don't want to cut it clear back because that's going to encourage more growth. A lot of times I'll just come in and pop off these blooms. So that way the rose doesn't think it has to make seeds. You get those blooms off. That helps the rose that's struggling. Make plans for fall planting if you want to add more roses to your garden. Choose heat-tolerant varieties that will do well here in Arizona. Help your fruit trees make it over the finish line and survive summer. Don't prune anything this month. Keep fallen or rotten or sun-damaged fruit picked up so that they don't encourage insects and disease. Monitor your trees for signs of water stress. If the leaves are curled up and they look thirsty, give them a drink. It's important that they get enough water when it's so hot. Apply the last round of citrus fertilizer to your trees between August and September. This can be an organic citrus fertilizer, or you can do my favorite method of worm castings, compost, and mulch. Water well before and after you fertilize. Split fruit on citrus, tomatoes, pomegranates is a watering issue. Do your best to provide regular, deep watering. Remove any split fruit because that's going to harbor insects and encourage disease. Perennial herbs might look a little haggard this month. Harvest as needed, but hold off giving them a big pruning until later this fall. Harvest and use basil. This is a great month for basil. Keep it harvested and that will prevent it from flowering. Let's talk about our landscapes. August is an excellent time to plant desert hardy trees and cactus. Their roots will get established quickly in the warm soil. It's not a good time to plant anything else. Wait. Most plants will do much better if you wait until fall to plant. If you have summer blooming shrubs like bird of paradise, oleanders, or Texas sage, you can give them a light pruning after flowering to encourage another flush of blooms. Don't top your trees. It's so damaging for plants. Instead, remove inner branches to open up the canopy, and that will make them safer in a windstorm. If a limb does break during a storm, prune it back to a main branch with a clean cut. That clean cut will heal over much better than a broken limb. Take a look around your yard and evaluate your plants. If they're really struggling, there's probably a reason. Either they're not getting enough water, they're getting too much sun, or they're not suited for growing in a desert climate. Make a plan to move or replace struggling plants with something better suited to that area. Some plants, like cypress trees, are especially susceptible to spider mites. They love hot, dry weather. Spray them down with the hose once a week, and that helps prevent big infestations. Those summer rains that we love also bring weeds. Pull them quickly before they set seed. Hopefully, we get a nice soaking rain. If we get at least ½ an inch, you can skip one watering. Think about ways that you can channel, store, or redirect the rainwater that comes into your yard. Install gutters, swales, and berms to keep that moisture in your yard and help your plants. This spring, I added rainwater storage, gutters, and channels and berms to my own yard. I connected that storage tank to my sprinkler supply, and I can water my garden with that rainwater. I love watching the rain fill up those berms and my storage tank. A soil probe or a really long screwdriver is an excellent tool to figure out how much you're watering your garden. When you put it in the soil, it will only go as deep as there is moisture in the soil. When it gets to dry soil, it stops. Aim to water your trees 3 feet deep, your landscape plants 2 feet deep, and annual plants about 1 foot. This is a good way to make sure you're watering deep enough. The summer heat and dry soils build up the salt level in the soils. As the summer progresses, city water supplies also become saltier. This presents a problem for your plants. Once this month, water twice as deep to flush those salts out of the root zones of your plants. So how often should you water during August? Right now, I'm running my watering grids every 2 days. Towards the end of the month, that will switch to every 3 days. High water use trees and shrubs like citrus, I'm watering once every 7 to 10 days. Desert adapted trees and shrubs, I'm watering once every 7 to 21 days, depending on the size of the plant. I'm filling up the oyas in my containers every other day, and by the end of the month, that will switch to every 3 days. Use these times as guidelines, but the best way to tell if you need to water is to check the soil. I know this was a lot to take in. You don't have to do everything. Use the tips that apply to you to help your garden be better. If you want more information and detail, head to my website where I also have a printable checklist with a lot of these tasks on it so you know exactly what to do. Do you have more tips for gardening in August? I would love to hear them. Let me know in the comments. If you would like to learn more, consider joining Growing in the Garden Academy. I teach a live online course every month about seasonal topics, and members have access to recordings of all past classes. Academy members also receive my garden journal, what I'm planting, harvesting, and doing in my garden, delivered to their inbox every 2 weeks. I hope to see you there.